right, we have a quorum, so we're going to start. Meeting will come to order. Well, congratulations, all of you, for being here in the summer. You're real troopers, and we're glad to have you. So the first thing is the adoption of the agenda. Are there any changes that need to be made?
Do we want to add this to the agenda, or when we adopt it, those changes for the future meetings?
Oh, yeah, okay. Sure.
So, Madam Chair, to the agenda on tab I, we want to add, starting in August, we're going to be doing Finance Committee meetings on the Tuesday. So let's add the Finance Committee meeting on Tuesday from 4 to 6, August 25th.
And the November meeting.
And then what we're going to look at, because of the holidays in November and December, the recommendation is that instead of having a November meeting, which would be the night before Thanksgiving, and a December meeting, which would be the week we're closed, the recommendation is that we have a meeting on Wednesday, December 2nd. So we'll do a joint November-December meeting on December 2nd. That's a Wednesday. Which means we'd also have our Finance Committee on Tuesday, December 1st.
Well, those are the additions to the minutes.
To the agenda?
Yeah.
I mean
to the agenda, I'm sorry. Can we have an adoption of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, agenda is adopted as corrected. Public comments, just so that we would keep reminding ourselves, they're limited to 5 minutes, unless there are many people who want to address the agenda, and then we may limit to 3 minutes. And we'll give you a 30-second warning when time is almost up. And Donna will do that. An individual can speak on any topic, whether it's on the agenda or not. They're intended to give information to the board. However, the board cannot respond to anything that is said in the public comment section because it is not on the published agenda. The board can only discuss what is on the published agenda. However, the board can also has the option of putting an agenda item on a subsequent board meeting. So if something comes up that they want to discuss that comes up in the public comments, then they can do that the next meeting. We ask that comments about personnel or about individual people, we cannot entertain those comments, so we ask you to refrain from making comments about that. And we ask that anyone who addresses the board do so in a respectful and courteous manner. So with that, do we have public comments tonight? The public comments, Ray Miller?
Great.
Ray.
Is it Ray? That was great.
Madam Chair, members of the governing board, President Grissom, thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much. My name is Greg Miller, and I am the next SGA president that will be sworn in next month, I assume. And I'd like to report that SGA is having a retreat, as they call it, they call it loosely a retreat. I know retreats. Anyway, it'll be in room 212. And Janet, that'll be on August 6th. And Janet Berry brought back a wonderful guest we had last year, very informative. She really helped us in a big way. Her name is Cindy Nava Miramontes, and she will be speaking with us about how to, educating us as to how to run student government, basically, the do's and the don'ts, and as we call it, Roberta's Rules of Order, and she's been really great. So I asked if we could have her back, and apparently she's in Washington D.C. these days, so she's in the stratosphere, but she's going to come back and help us, and that'll be a really productive time. I anticipate formally introducing myself next month, and whereas maybe I could be put on the agenda, that would be good. And I'd like to share the visions of students. I've gone around campus just questioning people. I haven't done any formal, a formal questionnaire, but students do seem to come to me with their interests and concerns, and so I'm trying to keep it short and sweet, but I'll have somewhat of a litany of suggestions that I've heard out there that students would love to see. Otherwise, and of course, this is all to create a more dynamic college atmosphere than we have today. We do have a very dynamic college, and it'll be a tall order to even improve upon that. So otherwise, I'm looking forward to meeting with all of you and getting to know all of you. And I thank you very much for allowing me this time to speak. And that's it in a nutshell.
Great, thank you. And you will be on the agenda every month, so you can bring back reports.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.
And we don't have anyone else signed up, so we will move on to the President's report.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I handed out a small written report to each of you. I'm also going to run through a PowerPoint really quick, but before we do the PowerPoint, I just want to thank the foundation committee members, and especially to John Rochester and Lawrence Fodor, who hosted a fundraising event last Saturday at their home to raise funds for the film program as well as the Red Dot Gallery. It was a great event. We got to see old friends and some new friends, and so I think it will be good for the college going forward. I think we may have mentioned it before, but we've been improving our relationship with the Santa Fe University of Art and Design. They've recently announced a new program where graduates of Santa Fe Community College who attend this fall can basically get a 66% reduction in tuition. And so we hope they get some students. We've helped them do outreach to our graduates of the past couple of years, especially in the areas in which they have programs. We do have a higher education center open house tomorrow afternoon from 4 to 7, so I'd encourage those here and those who might be watching on the streaming to come tomorrow to the higher education center and see the facility, but visit with our partners and learn about some of the programs that are being offered there. We're also going to be doing an evening open house here at Main Campus on August 11th from 6 to 7 for prospective students and their families. The theme of that session is Find Yourself at SFCC. And kind of related to that, we have some new ads that are running. Some are on TV, some are on the radio. In fact, the mayor did a radio ad that I heard today, so that's great. And then the Pancakes on the Plaza for July 4th was a big success. We had our table right in the middle of the plaza. Marcos Maez and Colette Lee were there, and our Veterans Resource Center, as well as our pending automotive program, were down there to advertise the college and recruit students. What I'd like to show is the PowerPoint, if it comes up real quick. A week or so ago, and I've forgotten the date already, we had Deputy Secretary Elizabeth Sherwood Randall from the U.S. Department of Energy. She's the number 2 person at the Department of Energy who came to campus. She toured, met with students and faculty over the Trades and Advanced Technology Center program. And then we had a roundtable with various representatives from employers, from partners, from faculty and students talking about workforce training. She's very interested in advancing workforce training in the areas of energy, including alternative energy programs. And so if we can get this up, is it going to work?
I think so.
Okay.
I'm just being real slow today.
Good picture.
PowerPoints are always slow.
Lots of pictures.
Our photographer did a great job this time. You can't see it, but he did a great job. It's almost like the computer went to sleep. Did it?
It's coming up.
Tired.
Okay. Well, that's still loading. Just want to let you know, we're going to, because so many people are off this month, being July, we're going to be doing the July and August WOW Awards and Employee of the Month Awards at the August board meetings. That's why we don't have one tonight, because I think both honorees tonight would not have been here. There we go. So we can just scroll through these. These are just some pictures. So this is, what the deputy secretary said, that, about needing a skilled workforce, and there's lots of opportunities. She seemed to be really excited about the programs we had here at the college. So obviously, here we are on the roof of the TATC. I'm pointing at something. This is a picture with the students and the faculty members who were part of the panel and part of the tour. Our students did a great job as usual. Here is a picture from the round table itself, where we had I thought we had a good discussion. You never know if the round tables are going to work pretty well, but I thought this one did quite well. And just a couple more pictures from the round table, and then of the deputy secretary talking to Mayor Gonzalez. And here we are in the greenhouse. I'm picking basil that she wanted to taste. So it was really good. And then this is with the board members and the administration that was there that day for the event. And I believe that's the last one. Great. Thank you. So that's my report.
Thank you. Mr. President. The enrollment report, we got one today on email because Dr. Gonzalez is ill. But is anyone here to give any presentation on that?
I can do it, Madam Chair, members of the board. For our summer school, we're still down just a little over 7%. We still got a couple of small classes that are 1 week classes, so that'll increase some of the numbers a little bit, but not a whole lot. We're sort of falling in line with what we'd anticipated this year of having an 8 to 10% decline in enrollment. For the fall, we are currently down about 9% from where we were at this point last year. Obviously, we still have a long ways to go. There's been quite a few students in this week registering and actually paying, which is always good. I think one of the key things to notice is that the number of courses being offered is down. We're trying to do a much better job, and I want to commend Margaret and the deans, of scheduling fewer classes so that we fill up classes before we add them, as opposed to having to go through and cancel a lot of classes. So we did schedule about 6% fewer classes, almost 7% fewer than we did last fall. And if they fill up, we'll add more classes in most areas. I have looked at a lot of the enrollments, and a lot of them are pretty healthy enrollments. The real key thing is after the payment date. Right now, students can register, and they don't have to pay until I think it's the end of next week. And then we'll have our first disenrollment from non-payment. And so we always lose a bunch of students, and then they come running in here and re-register and pay. So, the other thing that Dr. Gonzalez provided was a little update on recruitment initiatives that relate to this. We did just recently hire Marcos Maez as the permanent administrator of student recruitment and outreach, which means now we'll be advertising for a recruiter position to replace him because he moved up in the organization, so we're excited about that. Recruitment office is working with marketing and public relations on several events. I mentioned already the Find Yourself at SFCC program that we're doing on August 11th. We do have new advertisements both in the newspaper and on the radio, and really focusing in on learn more, earn more, pay less. That's the advantage of the community college. We've sent reminder postcards to students. We did a special mailing to folks who had a household with someone between the ages of 16 and 40. And so we're really targeting that age group. And our team held a recruitment retreat, and they're forming a recruitment advisory committee. So that is the enrollment report, unless there's any questions.
Are there any questions from the board?
Madam Chair,
Oh,
Randy, at what point do we have an idea if we have to cancel any courses?
Madam Chair, members of the board, the Academic Affairs Groups meets the Thursday before classes start to make the final decision. We do watch classes throughout the summer, and if we see some that really aren't going to make, we'll try to cancel them early. That way we can reach out to the students and let them have an opportunity earlier. But the final decision is made on that Thursday before classes start. So classes start on August 24th. So that's the final day. We always have people come in and say, well, I was going to register, but you canceled it. But we unfortunately have to make some decisions at that date.
So what if a student is on track and needs a course that needs to be taken in sequence? What happens if that class is canceled?
So that always is a challenge for the academic affairs folks. They do, if we know we're canceling a course out of the sequence, and then we try to readjust the sequence going forward. If it's a student who is near the completion of their degree, then we often do an independent studies to help that student get finished. We don't want to keep them from finishing. Some of our classes, if they have as few as 5 in them, we may do them as independent studies if the class lends itself to doing that, and the instructor then gets paid on a per-student basis. We can't really afford to run a class that has fewer than 8 or 10 students in it. It's just cost prohibitive. We do, if it's at the end of a sequence, oftentimes we will run smaller classes. At the beginning, we try not to because we always know we lose some students. So it is a challenge for academic affairs to know when to cancel and when to add. But we do adjust our scheduling if we cancel something out of sequence.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
a quick question on enrollment. Mr. President, do we have any numbers on what non-credit enrollment is looking like? I know we've had the discussion in the past that generally what happens as the economy picks up is that schools generally see their for-credit students drop, but non-credit courses usually pick up. Are we seeing that same trend for the fall, or do we have a way of knowing?
We don't have any numbers for that yet, Madam Chair, members of the board. However, we did see that trend in the spring. So our continuing ed enrollments were up in the spring from the previous year. So we've already seen that coming back a little bit. We are working closely. Vice President Peters is working with continuing ed. We're trying to see if we can find some new programs to offer and to create new opportunities because people have a little more disposable income these days.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right, we'll move to, do we have a faculty senate report tonight? Gone. Okay, how about a staff senate report?
No.
How about a student senate report?
But we don't have much to say, but I want to say thank you everybody in this board, Madam Chair, Mr. President Randy, for this year an opportunity and get this experience and share with you all this experience about economic situation, see all this go, and all this project we're doing in the laboratory. I have to say thank you everybody, for your support and all these activities, and also Mr. Greg Miller can continue this process and doing well too. So thank you everybody.
Thank you.
Tell us what you're going to do.
Well, I have some few things to do in this semester, but I have an offer to continue and do my PhD in the University of Caribbean University of Puerto Rico, and I want to finish some research I'm doing here now in New Mexico, but for sure I'm going to be on both sides here and there because we are working in transfer the program for the biology program to Puerto Rico and try to establish the first aquaculture program too there. And we're making some alliance with the U.S. Virgin Islands State University, University of Puerto Rico State, and also the Caribbean University for build the program. And for sure, the experience I get here in the last 3 years is awesome. This is a program I for sure I want promote in every part of this planet because it's amazing the interaction we have with the laboratories, with the EPSCOR in Mexico State, and it's in some way giving the opportunity to the student to grow up, to the student get research, and also promote and continue his 4 years degrees, and also more, because I think this program can offer more than also associate degree. Yes, the laboratory is prepared to see
Well, thank you. You have been a wonderful SGA representative, and we thank you for your participation and for your active involvement and for bringing us a student's perspective.
Madam Chair, just to add, you haven't seen the last of Willie. As you can see, he's got a lot of projects going, and they include Santa Fe Community College. So
All right.
now he's going to do them as an alumni. An alumnus.
Okay, the approval of the consent agenda. We have lots of minutes to approve.
Madam Chair, one correction on the minutes for the retreat of June 24th or 6th, whichever. On the last page, page 3, number 2 at the top of the page, it's Virginia V. Hill
Not Virginia Durant. So,
is the name we need to correct.
so, approval of the minutes.
Madam Chair, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We're slow tonight. Matters related to SFCC policy, the final reading of the 4-1 Code of Ethics and Conduct Policy. Who's talking to us about that?
It's on the consent agenda, so you want to take it
Oh,
off?
it's on the consent agenda,
Yeah.
so we don't have to chat about it unless people have questions.
Well, I do have one question.
Okay?
I noticed there is an exception for the near relative hiring. The exception that is that the president, under extraordinary circumstances, whatever that is, can hire a near relative, which we do ban otherwise.
Okay. And so, do you have a
I
question?
just wonder the advisability of that.
Would you like to comment?
Well, we're drawing our nepotism policy, so, you know, for consideration.
Daniel, pull the microphone.
We want that to be in the same line of supervision. Would be the main thing that we're looking at for that exception.
Right. There have been several instances where, because this is a fairly small community and very specific expertise is required for in some area, that the president has had to make an exception, or we wouldn't be able to cover that expertise. And so that's why that exception is in there. It isn't used very often, but once in a great while.
The exception basically says that you do not supervise your own relative. Yes, okay. Although, is there a motion? I guess we made two separate motions.
Right. So I move we approve this policy. It's a part of the consent.
Is there a second?
I just would like a little bit more clarification on that nepotism.
Would you like to second it and then?
Well, I'll second that.
And then we can have the discussion
Okay, I'll
and then you
second
can vote it down if you.
I second that.
So your question is?
My question is that I just would like to see something else in place that would not. I'd like to see a policy of the human resources that would maybe not give the president that authority to hire a relative or someone closer, member of the family.
So, Madam Chair, let me just make one statement here. Number one, there is a separate policy on nepotism, so this is really our ethics and code of conduct
Oh,
policy.
it's the ethics.
And so that's why it's in here. You know, I don't know of any exception that's been made in my experience here at the college. I don't think I've certainly made an exception. There have been exceptions where somebody has been hired to teach a class and their spouse, I'll give an example, might be the chair. They cannot supervise that person. If that's the only person who can really teach that class, then we always work to find another chair or a dean to directly supervise that person. So we do run into that occasionally. I've not seen any, I don't remember any other case at the college where it's happened other than in the teaching area. There may be some, but I don't know of one.
I just would like to see some transparency in the, if it's in the ethics, that's proper. If it's not in the personnel policy, but I just am sensitive to that, to the transparency. I don't know if you can include a wording that.
Do you think that sentence should be taken out? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
So can you prove it with that one exception, taking out that sentence?
I don't have a problem taking it out. It was in there before. That's why it's still in there.
So is that your pleasure? Shall we vote this down and then you can vote to table or you can vote to amend? You have a motion on the floor to accept. So all those in favor of accepting the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
Okay, the motion fails. Is there another motion? You can either table and bring it back next month, and we can talk about what you want differently, or you can move to strike that sentence.
Madam Chair, I move to table.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Right, and the motion carries. So we will table that and bring it to the next meeting. It may be useful if to have some explanation of how this relates to the nepotism policy, so that we can better understand why the sentence was there, what needs to happen with it. Okay?
That would be useful to me, because if it's never happened before, why bring it up now?
Right, we'll have to make sure that mirrors in policy 4.6.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, non-consent, the financial report. Nick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, President Grissom. Before you, you have the financial report for June 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year 15. And at June 30th, we have $10.4 million in cash in all of our bank accounts. There's $4.8 million in the Wells Fargo operating account. ING revenues are up $1 million, and that's 3% compared to the prior year. Expenditures are down $3.9 million, and that would be 11% to the down 11% compared to the prior year. We, if you look at compensation, we're looking at compensation being down $1.6 million. And then if you look at fund balance, our ING fund balance has improved to $2 million in June. Last year at the same time, the audited financials show a fund balance at $1.3 million. However, that was due to transfers in to the ING fund. Instruction in general is at 101% of anticipated budgeted revenues. And that's compared to 99% at June of last year. That turns out to be the $1 million increase from year to year in revenues. ING expenses are down, or are actually at 98% of budget this year, and that's compared to 105% of budget last year. And that would be a total decrease of about $3.9 million. And I've saved the best news for last. We are actually, in terms of our ING budget, we are under budget about $700,000 in terms of budgeted revenues. Budgeted expenditures. And so at the end of June, we've come in under budget. However, we are still doing end-of-year close processes. We're looking at having to do some accruals back to the FY15 budget. But we look like we're in good shape. So with that, if you have any questions, we could go through in more detail if you'd like.
Other questions?
Madam Chair, I really like this report. Every time that you come, you seem to be adding to our surplus or doing very well with the expenditures. This may change, however. This is ending June 30th, right?
That is correct.
So that we went back to our funding, full funding for the wages July 1st. Is that correct?
Yes, we did.
So,
Madam Chair, board member.
so what's your anticipation? What will it look like next month?
So, Madam Chair, Board Member Cedillo, since we're 2% under budget this year, as far as expenditures go, that goes to the bottom line, carried over till next year.
Right.
And so that helps us. We've budgeted all of the pay, the reinstatement of all pay throughout the college. And so that has already been built into our entire budget.
Mhm.
So as long as revenues come in as we anticipate, again, we've been very conservative with those anticipated budgeted revenues for FY16. So as long as those come in as we are forecasting, then we're going to be all right, because the budget is balanced for this FY15-16 year.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a couple of comments about, this is the last financial report for our fiscal year, which is very telling about where we've been in the last couple of years. So one of the things that we see is that we lived within our budget this year, that we only expended 98% of what we budgeted, compared to last year where we spent 105% of what we budgeted. And one of the reasons why we ended up in this situation this year than they are this year. So I really think that sums up the story of where the college has been over the last couple of years. And I really want to thank President Grissom and our employees at the college, especially in financial management, for everything that they've done this year in managing our cash flows very, very tightly to take us from an undesirable financial situation and put us back in a place where we're headed down the right path.
We're not there yet. We don't have the reserve, but we're on our way. When is the audit?
The audit, I've been in communication with our independent auditors, and they'll be on campus August 3rd to do some initial testing in student financial aid. It's pretty straightforward, a pretty straightforward part of the audit. And then they will also, we're still working on the following 2 weeks, but it looks like they'll be on campus the following 2 weeks in August as well.
Okay. So do we have?
And so will we have our audit committee meet with them initially? Our board audit committee?
It's usually the process they follow is we meet with them initially and then we meet with them when the audit is complete. Yes.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we still need to work out some details as to when we want to have the entrance conference as well as the exit conference. So what they're doing right now is preliminary, so we do need to do that. So we will be scheduling the audit committee to meet with them, and we just got to figure out when's the right time to do that.
Is there a?
I have another.
Oh, you have another question?
Oh, I noticed that we have a $285,000 kids campus deficit. I thought we were going to get some money for that.
Board members, Siegel, we have identified an accounting practice at the college that we are able to move expenses at the end of the year as a part of our end-of-year close process. And so what we have is essentially $45,000 that we'll be able to move out of there. And that's a part of the, I guess, a child food program that we have at the Kids Campus program. So we can, ultimately, we'll be decreasing that amount by $45,000.
So that's money that we took in, but that we haven't been allocating to the kids' campus?
Madam Chair, that is correct. What's been happening is we've been showing the full expenses of the kids' campus, but we have discovered that in the past years, they haven't been going back and either taking expenses out or adding the revenues back in for the third-party reimbursement that we get for the lunches. And so Nick and I have been talking about that. We're going to fix that process. So either the expenses never show up in kids' campus because they're getting reimbursed, or we put the revenues there. Either way, it's the right thing to do. My preference right now is the revenues, because it really is a revenue. It's really third-party pay for food, but it is a process that we, as we've dug into this, that we've discovered that we've been really overstating the amount of subsidy by that amount of money.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, board members, if you take a look at bar number 1, and you look at the subsidy in the bottom right-hand corner, $251,000, that is within the budgeted amount that we had for the subsidy for all of our public services. And so what we really need to do is decrease that $251K by about, the $45,000 for the Kids Campus program, as well as there's $12,000 we're going to be moving out for out of public access TV. So that number will decrease.
Okay.
Just, Madam Chair, members of the board, just remind you, this is our preliminary June, because June will never be finished until the audit's done. And so there will be moving pictures. They'll come in and make us do some adjustments and a variety of things. We are, as Nick said, we are still getting some bills in that relate to June. And so that $680,000 that we budgeted that we haven't spent yet will shrink some. But we know that it's a big enough number that it's not going to shrink to the negative.
Anything else from the board?
Can I ask a quick question around accounts receivable?
Yes. Good question.
Yes.
So we're making some progress. We have over $1 million outstanding in accounts receivable, right? But we are making progress.
That is
Give us
true.
an update on that?
Yes, we discussed this, Madam Chair, board members. We discussed this yesterday in our Finance Committee meeting. And if you take into consideration funding that we've received in July, that is outstanding on your current board report in front of you, if you take that into consideration, we've received between July 1 and now, we've received about $446,000 in receivables. And so that really cuts the bottom line number down to about $668,000 in outstanding receivable. So the grants department, contracts and grants department are working really hard on making sure we manage that as well as we can for cash flow purposes. They understand the importance of it.
So we're finally getting people to pay their bills.
Madam Chair, at the end of the year, we do get people caught up. The main thing is that really, if you looked at around July 15th, it wasn't June 30th, everybody's just about current. The only thing still owed to us is the 0 to 30 days, which is current, and a little bit of the 31 to 60 days, I believe.
And Madam Chair, as we discussed yesterday, we're looking at the TACT grant expenditures starting to increase very, very soon. So that is going to require a lot of management and diligence over making sure that we promptly get those back for our cash flow. Make sure that we have enough cash flow.
So, Madam Chair, so on the tech grant that we've got, now we had $5 or $6 million to administer that, is that correct?
Madam Chairman, members of the members of the board, of the $15 million grant, about $5.6 million of it comes to Santa Fe Community College. So part of that is to cover our cost of deliverables, but part of it is also our management and oversight, and there is an indirect cost that comes to support the college.
Okay, good.
Anything else?
But Mr. President and CFO tell us, if I understand it right, we'll see that whole 17 million flow through this cash flow. It won't just be the,
Correct.
yeah.
So the whole $15 million grant will flow through Santa Fe Community College. $5.6 million of it is spent here. The rest is reimbursement back to the partner colleges. They have to spend their funds first before they bill us. And then we bill the Department of Labor on this particular grant. This is one that we can usually get them to process fairly quickly. So we should be able to manage the cash flow, but it's going to take extra work in the finance area, and that's one of the reasons we're in the process of hiring a grants manager who will be partially paid for by the grant.
Is this a multi-year grant?
Yes, I believe it's 4 years.
4 years. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve the financials.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No, motion carries. Approval of another resolution. Mr. Tellison, President Grissom,
Yes, I think
Ask
we
Mr.
have a,
Cassidy to come up.
and Mr. Cassidy.
Madam Chair, I think we have a PowerPoint presentation as well that's available so the public can see. And then we're also handing out some information to you.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Paul Cassidy.
You move that mic over.
Good evening. I'm Paul Cassidy with RBC Capital Markets. We're the college's independent financial advisor. So, Madam Chair, members of the board, President Grissom, at the last meeting that you asked us to attend to review the bond financial condition of the college, we were directed to bring back a resolution that Mr. Tejas has prepared. We've reviewed that requests a certain tax rate be set for your bond debt service going forward. It's a very short resolution, but it's helpful if you have it in place as a governing board to really allow us to actively manage the tax rate and request that HED set the tax rate at our long-range target tax rate for debt service at $1 per 1,000 of assessed valuation. Our tax rate has been in the 93-cent range recently, but it was not really actively managed, and we really need to get back to the $1 level, and we probably need it because we've not had tax-based growth like you've had historically speaking. If you look back historically, we were having 8 to 10% growth in your tax base, but the last 5 years we've had growth of 1% on average, and maybe actually a little below that. We had 1 year where we had a shrinkage of 5% in the tax base. In addition to that, the college has a long-range facility master plan, and having regular bond elections is just part of the process of maintaining your facilities and changing the facilities in a way to meet your programmatic needs and to maintain your facilities to an adequate condition. We've done long-range planning. We've updated the presentation that we took a fair amount of time with you at the last board meeting. And if it's helpful, I can take you through that and just point out the changes if it's appropriate tonight. And if you want me to do that, we'll do that. And I have the hard copy here in front of you. I think the screen may not show this as well as maybe we ought to. But if I could just direct you all to page 2 of the presentation, the change that we made here is to present to you the 2015 tax year final assessed valuation before protests are settled. So I say final, but it's really a preliminary until the county assessor here has their protest hearing. That number is $5,989,000,000, and it's up about, 11 million from the prior year. So it's only about a 1.17 or a 0.17% growth rate over the prior year. The other thing that's changed a little bit on this slide is the percent bonded to capacity that we're at, and it's because the constitutional and state law limitation on the amount of debt the governing board can have outstanding voter-approved debt is 3% of the district's assessed valuation. That number now is $179,674,000. We have $27.7 million of outstanding debt, so we have available capacity of $151 million. So we're about 15.45% bonded to capacity. On page 3, if I could direct you there, what we've added here is an estimate of what we think the tax rates will be for the 2015 tax year, the tax bill that goes out November 1st. These are very preliminary, but to the extent the board is successful in getting your tax rate at a $1 for your mill levy for debt service, and your operating levy remains about 2.695 mils. Our tax rate is really going to be virtually unchanged for the average taxpayer, and within the city limits and outside the city limits. Page 4 is the concept of a bond cycle, and this is where you have a facility master plan process that is updated periodically. That's a living document, and you have bond elections regularly, whether every 3 or 4 or 5 years, and we plan for those, and we make sure we, as we're setting up debt service schedules, payment schedules for your bonds as they're being sold, we make room for future bond issues and bond elections so the tax rate can remain stable, and you can tell your constituents that the tax rates will not change. Page 5 is just setting forth the tools that are available to community college districts in working with HED to set tax rates. The easiest one to accomplish is if you have a concern that your tax rate's going to fall and you have authorized and unissued a general obligation debt, we can submit a draft schedule to HED. They'll take that into consideration in setting the tax rate at the desired level. Or if you have bonds that are optionally redeemable, it can be called away from investors currently, we can tell them we're going to do that, and that's enough justification to maintain the tax rate at the desired level. The third is to, if we don't have currently callable bonds and we have no authorized unissued general obligation bonds, we can defease outstanding bonds by taking cash, creating an escrow account, irrevocable escrow account that pays off certain bonds when they mature or when they are callable. And then lastly, there are short-term bonds that could be issued if you have authorized and unissued bonds. So the thing that we would rely on this year, since we don't have authorized and unissued bonds, is the third one. Is if to the extent that we don't have an election in the next 6 to 8 months, and we have excess cash that builds up in the debt service fund, we'll tell the HED that we'll defease outstanding bonds.
Madam Chair, if I may. Mr. Cassidy, could you explain what sponge bonds are?
Sponge Bob, those of you with sponge bonds. It's a concept, and it's a really good question. You notice how we highlighted it. It's not a technical term. It's a non-technical term. The debt service fund that is established within Mr. Tejas' books is a restricted fund. So all money that is levied by the college district through the county treasurer comes back after the collection process and is put in this this restricted fund. You can't do anything with those monies except to pay principal and interest on bonds that the governing board issues. You can't use it for salaries. You can't use it to pay capital expenditures. It has to be used for bonds. It's really restricted, and it's a protective mechanism. So if we're building up cash and we have bonds that are authorized and unissued, we can actually issue bonds one day and pay them off the next day, and that is really sponging the money out of that.
Sponging.
That soak it out of there. We use it up, and we don't have long-term debt that we're issuing.
Okay, so it's like a lockbox.
It's a lockbox.
It's a lockbox, but when you're going to, next day you can pay off
The
your
debt
debt.
we issue.
Yeah, good. Thank you. That makes sense.
Severance tax program uses the sponge bond concept very routinely to keep money from falling into the state permanent fund before June 30th or December 31st, so they can use it for things the legislature authorizes, for capital improvements, actually. If you're ready, I'll go on to page 6. Page 6 is a comparison of all the community colleges and college districts across the state of New Mexico. Santa Fe is highlighted in blue, so we can, as governing board members, you can compare yourself against other similar New Mexico college districts. Things I like to pull off of this are what percent bonded to capacity are we compared to other college districts? What's our tax rate for debt service? What's our operating tax rate? And all this data is as of last June 30th of 2014. We don't have all the data yet to update this through June 30th of 15, but we will be doing that. Also, the bond ratings of the college districts are also set forth here, and you'll find that you're very highly rated. You're in a AA1 by Moody's category, which is right under the AAA category. We did spend a fair amount of time on that at the last meeting. Page 7. We've done a little bit of cleanup here, and that is the key points of a debt management plan. So to the extent you're looking at your facility master plan, you need an accompanying debt management plan to go along with that to implement the capital improvement plan. So what we recite here is your recent historical election, which was in 2010, the last capital election. $35 million of bonds are authorized. You've now sold all $35 million worth of bonds. The next election can be as early as 2016. And you can push it out, obviously, as far as you want to go. We've just assumed, for calculation purposes, that you would have a 2016 election, and it would be $30 million. That could be at a no tax rate increase election. The facility master plan process would confirm what you need in terms of an election size. 30 million may be too high, 30 million may be too low, depending on what your actual priorities are that you need. We have assumed 4-year election cycles. There is no problem from a debt capacity standpoint under the constitutional limit of 3% of assessed valuation. We've structured the debt for this purpose using a 12-year final maturity schedule. State law allows you to go out to 20. It's our view that the shorter debt will sell at a lower interest rate, recreate capacity, and recreate facility master plan capacity. And then every year you actively manage your tax rate by doing what you've started this month, is to adopt a resolution requesting HED to work with you. On page 8, there's a long-term GO bond cycling program presented, and this is our crack at issuing the maximum amount of bonds we can issue, pretty much maxing it out, without a tax rate increase, with elections every 4 years. And 2016 is 30 million. 2020 would be another 30 million. And we would, every 4 years, we would review this, update it. And the thought process is we're not just going to plan for the next 4 years, but we're going to actually make sure we can accommodate a long-term plan. So every 4 years you can have an election.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I want to make sure that the public who may be watching the streaming understands this is all hypothetical. We're in the process. We will be updating our master plan this year. This is what we could do if we wanted to. We could go out to an election for 30 million next year and not raise taxes. And so this is all hypothetical. As we all know, the odds of doing that next year are probably pretty small. And even if we decided to go out next year, I don't think we'd be looking for 30 million. So, but it is a hypothetical. This is just to show that where things stand right now, we could do it. And if we did it, it wouldn't raise taxes.
So if you go out, let's say for 15 million next in 16, do you increase then the amount you could ask for in 2020, or does 2020 stay at max?
Madam Chair, if your election's only for 15 million, we could structure the debt to soak up that cash in your debt service fund, meaning we could probably shorten up the debt. Instead of 12 years, it would be for a shorter period, but it would just recreate capacity. To the extent you leave your tax rate in the dollar range, you're going to have this kind of capacity that's shown in this book on a long-term basis.
Other questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes. Bubba.
Question. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Cassidy. I was impressed with the last presentation that you made. I have a question regarding going from 93 to $1. Can that money be used, say, for salary increases?
Madam Chair and board members, Cedillo, no, it cannot be. It can only be used to pay bond debt service.
Bond debt service.
It's primarily facilities.
Which is, to get money for facilities.
Madam Chair, could you explain to me the tax rate? Does that apply to only our local bonds, or does that somehow affect us too for severance bonds and the other bonds that come to the college from the state for funding?
Madam Chair and Member Keith, it only applies to the bonds the governing board of this college district authorizes.
Our local bonds.
Now you're referring to the state general obligation bond program, and that there's a tax rate on the books that everybody statewide pays to service that program. It's $1.36 per thousand compared to your target $1 tax rate. And that they have a 2-year cycle. So every 2 years you have a statewide GO bond election, and hopefully Santa Fe has gotten their share of that state bond money when the elections come up. Everyone competes for it through the legislative process.
Other questions?
Thank you.
None? So are we ready to?
Can I ask one more question? When we look at page 6 of your presentation and we do the comparisons down the row, so many of them of institutions across the state, we don't have information on what their outstanding debt or percentage to capacity. Does everybody have the ability to bond? Do all these institutions listed have the ability?
Madam Chair and Member Keith, yes, they do.
They do.
They have the 3% debt limit, just like the college district here does.
Okay. And do some of them
boards don't believe in it?
Yeah, do some of them choose not to use it? Is that why they're a 0, or do we just not have the information?
No, we actually we do have the information. If you go down the list, I'll just highlight them. Eastern New Mexico, Ruidoso could and have thought about it and haven't done it. Luna tried and it wasn't successful. Mesa Lands hasn't tried. New Mexico Junior College District hasn't had to recently. Carlsbad has not had to recently. Grants just did it, did bonds, and there'll be a tax levy on this next year. And when we update this as of June 30th, 15, they will be shown with outstanding debt. I can't remember the number, maybe $800,000 of debt or so. And Los Alamos hasn't been able to pass one. They need one. And Taos hasn't scheduled one, and I'm not sure if they actually need one. So they have the ability, Member Keith, to do this.
Okay.
And everyone's circumstance is a little different. Everyone's program is a little different. We're all unique college districts across the state.
Thank you. A follow-up question to that, just a question. So on the very top of the slide on page 6, the next to the last column is college total. I'm not sure that I follow what we're totaling there.
Sure, and it's and you're right. It's not as clear here as it could be. That is a total of the operating tax rate for each college district and the debt tax rate. And if there's other, then that would be added. So it's those 3 tax levies that total. For instance, we are at $3.63.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you could have your voters have approved an operating mill levy of up to $3 per thousand of assessed valuation, which has been yield controlled back to $2.70. That's that statute that due to reappraisal, they roll the levy back so there's no windfall to taxpayers and to the operating funds here. So that could go up as high as $5, but it would take voter approval to raise that. And then our debt levy has to be voter approved through the issuance of bonds. And the other is just, I think, a separation of a levy. I think it's more operating levy. That is for Gallup. That's operating funds over and above their $3 levy.
So I thought that the question before from Member Cedillo was that we couldn't use the levy for operating costs, that it was only for capital outlay, basic capital improvements.
And I'm sorry I didn't clarify that. That is the debt levy. The debt levy cannot be used for operating purposes.
Right. Okay.
However, all college districts have an operating levy that has been voter approved that doesn't have to be reapproved every year. There's no sunset on it.
Okay.
So our Santa Fe has a $3 tax rate in place
Okay.
For operating, and that money comes in just like the debt service money comes in and is put in a debt service fund and restricted to that. The operating money can be used in your operating budget and is budgeted along with all the other state revenues and federal revenues to pay the operating cost.
Let me just clarify, Paul, so you mentioned Gallup, so that one that's in other, that's an operating
As I recall,
levy?
it's President Grissom, it is operating related. I can't recall why they separated it into a separate calculation under the tax levy.
So, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Cassidy, so there is a way that we can have the operating levy through what we could use for operating expenses, approved by the voters.
Madam Chair and Member Cedillo, yes, you could request your voters approve an increase in the operating levy.
Oh, okay.
And that
$5
would
million,
affect
I'm
the
sorry if I
tax.
didn't clarify that. Yes.
That would affect the tax rate differently?
It would. It would, and you'd have to schedule an election to do this.
Okay.
Right.
But in that case, we could not say that it would not improve, it would not increase their taxes.
In that case, you would have to tell voters the tax rates are increasing.
By much?
If it depends upon what your needs are, Madam Chair and Board Member Cedillo, we were happy to show you what that change is. So we could calculate it. So you could go up $2 per 1,000 of assessed valuation for operating levy. That would produce, well, for every 1 mil, I think you can count on getting about $5.8 million of new revenue.
Oh.
All right. So, but 1 mil might raise your average taxpayer's cost, maybe $100 a year. And it's a pretty steep increase in this environment. But it's possible. We're happy to explore that through Mr. Tejas' offices and report back to the board. Happy to do that.
Madam Chair, I would like to see if we could see some numbers.
President Grissom.
Madam Chair, and members of the board, just, the 3 mil levy that we have for operations is generating the $16.7 million of our local appropriation. We get the full 3 mil levy on commercial. For residential, right now, we're getting about $2.70 of every because of yield control.
Right.
And so as the market has changed and people are now selling, if somebody sells their house, the new buyers pay 3.
Right.
It's the people who've been there for a while that are yield controlled. So, there is a way to do that, but we would have to go out to an election if we wanted to increase our operating mill levy.
And just a little history on that, when we were working on the building, the concept of the higher education center, the prior president had suggested that we increase our operating mill, but the board was resistant.
So it's a harder sell.
It's very harder, much harder sell.
It's harder, but
You'd like to see numbers as well.
I'd like to see numbers. I just would like to see ways that we can start paying more of a just wage to our employees.
Be happy to assist in getting those numbers to your staff.
Good idea. I'd estimated 5 million.
I just want to clarify, the board resolution only focuses on your debt service
Right, I
rate
understand
as
that.
opposed to the operating rate.
I understand that.
Just, for those who
Right.
may not be here and viewing it online.
Great, thank you. And so, Vice President, tell us, maybe you can work on that with him, with Mr. Cassidy.
So, with all of that information, Madam Chair, board members, I don't know if you want to review the resolution that we put together.
Please.
And so, management's recommending that the board approve a debt service bond rate of $1 per each $1,000 of assessed valuation of taxable property in the district for the upcoming tax year. And the background is that we have to submit this information to HED so that they can certify our tax rate. And with board action today, it will help HED keep current the current tax rate. So I don't know if you have anything else to add on that.
So that's the resolution. Is it up there anywhere where we can see it?
He's bringing it up.
You getting it up?
Do you want to talk about the debt
You want to see mine?
on that, or?
While that's being pulled up, there's a section here, it says the college will only use any debt service funds collected over and above the requirements of the 2010 bonds and the 2013 outstanding bonds to redeem a portion of the 2010 or 2013 bonds early through a defeasance processes provided for in the bond resolutions which authorized the 2010 and 2013 bonds. So that if you look at the old transcripts, resolutions approved by the governing board at the time of issuance, this process is allowed for. It also does recite in here that should the board schedule an election and have an election, we could also, the intent would be, if it makes more sense, to use that money over and above what we may need. It's not a lot of money, by the way, to pay debt service on those new bonds that may be authorized if you decide to move forward.
So there is the resolution. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the resolution.
Second.
All right, any more discussion?
So, Madam Chair, just a clarification that this too has no effect on current tax rates for voters.
I'll just point out, Madam Chair and Member Keith, that the current tax rate, it's historically been $1, very close to $1, and we're asking HED to set it at as close to $1 as they can justify. They have a responsibility to only levy for what is required. And it's been 93 cents, so it may be 93 cents, it may be up to $1.
Okay.
It's not a material increase, but it would be an increase if it's above 93 cents.
Okay.
Madam Chair, call the question.
All those in favor of the resolution?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, tab F and tab G have nothing to report. We're down to board reports, and in the board report, I want to just, for the record, talk a little bit about the board retreat notes that are in the that are in our minutes, but just to kind of make those more obvious to the public. The board had a retreat on the 26th of June. And we did a number of things. We began the president's evaluation. We first of all reviewed the notes from the May meeting as the agenda stated. We went into closed session to begin the evaluation of the president. And we used the document that we have used traditionally and decided that that was insufficient for what we are wanting to do. And we appointed Ms. Siegel and Ms. Keith to review the evaluation survey the board has used to evaluate itself, and we will be bringing that back with possibly a policy change. We appointed Siegel and Romero to review a survey that we want to administer to the campus regarding the president's accomplishments and the institution's accomplishments in the past year. And that will be coming to the campus in early September and will be reported back to the board in October. So that will complete our evaluation of the president. The board also took care of setting some goals for itself. Among the goals were that we need to set in place a way to establish our own professional development so that we can model for the rest of the institution that we too believe in professional development and continuous learning. We want to oversee and set deadlines for policy revisions for this year, and the president is working on bringing us a recommendation on that. We want to participate in more legislative advocacy, and we talked about that a bit. We want to establish a process with the president to lead a board discussion on student success measures by department at each board meeting. So this is a change in how we have done our business before. And then we want to develop a plan for community stakeholder interaction. We reviewed the president's goals for the foundation, and those had been approved previously, so that was just a review for us. We set the following goals. We began to talk about goals for the president for the next year. And we talked about these tentatively because we will not complete them until we have feedback from the campus and we have a sense that these are in fact the goals that we should pursue, that we want the president to pursue, or we might make some changes to those following our conversations. We are in the process of establishing a review process for feedback from the campus. One of the things we'll look at is at the Noel Levitt's results that are coming in currently. And then we also want to establish what is called an appreciative inquiry process that actually looks at what are the good things that this campus is doing and how should we support and encourage more of that. So that will be coming to you in early September. We established a difference in committee structure. Standing committees as opposed to ad hoc committees. The standing committees, last year, while we had very good work that was done by two of our members who sat on the committee, the internal finance committee, the board as a whole decided that we all need to have the same information since we are all charged with making those decisions. So the board will function as a committee of the whole, and we will meet the night before our regular board meeting for 2 hours to go over that. The finance committee internally, the campus committee, will continue and will continue to function with representatives from the various bodies. And more on that will be forthcoming, I believe. We continued Pablo Cedillo and Martha Romero to serve on the foundation board. The AGC board, new chairs, Kathy Keith and Martha Romero is the vice chair. We are reinstituting the Training Center Corporation, and by legislation or by bylaws, the president is the chair of that group, and Kathy Keith and Pablo Cedillo will serve as the board's representatives, with Martha Romero as an alternative if we need that. The legislative committee is Linda Siegel and Paul Cedillo, and the audit committee will be Jack Sullivan and Linda Siegel. We also established some ad hoc committees because we decided that one of the things that we have not perhaps taken too seriously and need to be more clear about is that a committee can function for a time and then it is no longer needed. So we're calling those ad hoc committees. The stakeholder plan, Jack Sullivan and Kathy Keith are working on. The legislative plan will continue to be Linda Siegel and Pablo Cedillo, and they will be in communication with Virginia Vigil, whose name we had misquoted in the minutes. The board professional development, the president and I will work with, and the evaluation document review both to look at the documents that and the process that we set in place, and that will probably require a revision of our policy about the CEO evaluation. Linda Siegel and I are working on, and we met, in fact, today to begin that process. New board goals for the HEC. One of the things the board discussed was that the HEC is now, for a while, our focus was, let's get this building built and let's get people to populate it. And now we're at a place where we need to go to next steps. So Kathy, Keith, and I will be working with the HEC director and have met once already to talk about that. And you might want to talk a little bit about what we were talking about in that vein.
Our goals, it looks like what we've discussed is putting in place this year a strategic plan for the Higher Education Center so we can really define what the vision of that fabulous facility is now that it's been built and how we can best use it to serve the community. And that would be a year-long process with a goal of having that strategic plan. And the other goal is increasing partnerships. So increasing both the number of classes being offered by our offerings by our current partners and looking at others, educational partners who would join us in offering additional classes and programming at the HEC.
So that took care of a pretty big day, as you can imagine. With that, we have, we have one other discussion item, the possible rental of the HEC office space.
Madam Chair, I'll leave that discussion off. We've been having conversations with Board Member Keith, who is the Executive Director of the Regional Development Corporation. They are looking for some office space in Santa Fe. They're a close partner of the Small Business Development Center, and we think that the potential of having them housed there until we need those offices for other purposes would be a good fit. It obviously is something we'd need disclosure. If we do rent the offices, they will be paying the same rate as our other partners do, so there would be no preferential treatment. So basically, the discussion today or presentation today is just to disclose that we may go that route unless somebody sees a reason to object to it.
Okay. Any questions or comments from other board members? Okay. With that done, the next board meeting is Wednesday, August the 26th. And we will have an August 25th Finance Committee meeting, the Committee of the Whole, on the 25th from 4 to 6 p.m. That is an open meeting. Anyone is welcome to attend if they so choose. And if the Internal Finance Committee wants to make presentations, we would welcome that as well. And then we are looking at a December joint meeting on December the 2nd with the Finance Committee meeting on December the 1st.
Madam Chair, one of the things I forgot to ask, we were going to do a Learning Center District Board meeting in August. The plan was to have that meeting at the Higher Education Center to get us over there. So our question is, could we normally start our work sessions at 3 o'clock, could we do the Learning Center District Board meeting there as early as 2 o'clock and then travel back over here for the work session and the dinner and the regular board meeting? Or do we need to start at 3 o'clock and just move this board meeting to start at 6 o'clock?
What is the board desire on that?
26.
Anybody have a preference? Is it possible for you all to meet at 2 o'clock? Yes? Kathy?
Probably.
It's difficult for me to do that in the middle of the day, so I would prefer that we would start the meeting later.
And I think that would be fine. So let's plan to do the Learning Center District Board at 3. It won't be very long. We have to allow a little travel time. We'll come back over here and do the work session, maybe starting at 4, and start this regular meeting at either 5:30 or 6. We'll work on what we need to post. We can start late, but we can't start early.
Okay.
We have to post the agenda. We can post it for 5:30 and start at 6, but we can't post it for 6 and start at 5:30.
Okay. All right, so we will make that adjustment for you.
Okay.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Yes, all right. With no other public business to transact, We can go into closed session. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we go into closed session for purposes of discussion of pending or threatened litigation pursuant to 1015 IH7, New Mexico State NMSA 1978, employment claims involving pending administrative complaints or claims, issues pending litigation against SFCC, and threatened litigation by former employee regarding issue with retirement benefits, and for the purpose of discussion of personally identifiable information about any student unless the student, his parent, or guardian requests otherwise, pursuant to 1015 IH4, discussion of threat and complaint made by student.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll go into closed session. Thank you very much for being here. I'm sorry, did you? Oh, okay.
Donna?
I thought we
We
had
just
questions.
leave this?
She wants to answer, she wants to grab me for a second.
Okay. Donna, would you make sure that we check with Nick about when the when we can have the information that